"This house isn't yours anymore, Evelyn," my daughter-in-law said while standing in the kitchen I had spent the entire afternoon cleaning for her guests. The words landed softly, almost politely, but they cut deeper than shouting ever could. My son Daniel stood beside the refrigerator pretending to check something on his phone, while I held a dish towel in my trembling hands and tried to understand how I had become unwelcome in the very home I helped save. 3 weeks earlier, I still believed sacrifice could keep a family together. I still believed a mother giving up everything for her child meant something. The last box from my old house was still sitting unopened near the staircase. A faded label written in black marker read, "Family Photos." I looked at it every morning but hadn't found the courage to open it yet. Maybe because deep down I already knew the woman smiling in those pictures no longer belonged anywhere. "Vanessa doesn't mean it like that," Daniel finally muttered without looking at me. His voice sounded weak, tired, practiced. Like he had been explaining away her cruelty for years, and had slowly forgotten the difference between loyalty and cowardice. Vanessa crossed her arms and leaned against the marble counter we had practically paid for. "I just think boundaries are important," she said with that calm smile she always used when she wanted to sound reasonable. "You've been here almost a month, Evelyn. The kids need stability." Stability. I almost laughed at the word. 2 months ago, Daniel had sat across from me at my dining room table with tears in his eyes telling me his business was collapsing. He said they were behind on the mortgage. Said the bank was threatening legal action. Said he didn't know how to protect his family. I remember staring at my late husband's photograph afterward for nearly an hour before making the decision. 32 years in that house. 32 Christmas mornings. 32 summers planting roses along the front walkway with Richard before cancer took him 4 years ago. I sold that house in 11 days. I signed the paperwork with shaking hands and transferred nearly every dollar to Daniel because that is what mothers do when their children are drowning. They jump in after them, even if they cannot swim anymore themselves. Daniel promised I would always have a place with them. "You'll never be alone again, Mom," he had told me while hugging me outside the title office. Vanessa even cried that day. I remember thinking maybe I had judged her too harshly all these years. Maybe stress had made everyone distant. Maybe family could still heal. But standing there in that cold designer kitchen, watching my own son avoid my eyes while his wife quietly erased me from their lives, I realized something painful. They had not invited me into their home because they loved me. They invited me because they needed my house first. The dishwasher hummed softly behind us. Somewhere upstairs, my granddaughter laughed at a cartoon playing too loudly. Life continued around me as if my heart were not slowly cracking open inside my chest. I folded the dish towel carefully and placed it beside the sink. "I understand," I said quietly. Vanessa gave a small relieved nod, already satisfied she had won something. Daniel still said nothing. That hurt more than her words ever could. Later that night, lying awake on the pull-out bed in the basement, I stared at the ceiling while the pipes groaned softly overhead. The room smelled faintly of fresh paint and laundry detergent. Temporary smells. Temporary space. Temporary mother. And for the first time in my 68 years, I began to wonder if the biggest mistake of my life had not been trusting strangers. It had been trusting my own family. The next morning, I woke up before everyone else and lay still on the narrow pull-out bed listening to the house settle around me. Water pipes clicked softly somewhere inside the walls. The furnace turned on with a low hum. Above my head, footsteps crossed the kitchen floor. Vanessa was already awake. I checked the small clock beside the basement lamp. 5:37 in the morning. For a moment I forgot where I was. Then I saw the stacks of storage bins lining the unfinished wall beside me, and remembered everything all over again. My old bedroom had faced east. Every morning sunlight would spill across the hardwood floors Richard had refinished by hand during the summer Daniel turned 16. I used to wake to birdsong and the smell of roses drifting through the open window. Down here, the air smelled faintly damp no matter how often I cleaned. I folded the blanket neatly and slipped my feet into slippers before climbing the stairs quietly. Vanessa liked the house silent in the mornings. "Too much noise throws off my entire day," she once told me after I accidentally started the coffee grinder while she was on a work call. I learned quickly after that. The kitchen looked spotless except for Daniel's laptop open across the island counter beside an empty energy drink can. Vanessa stood at the sink scrolling through her phone while the coffee machine brewed. She glanced at me briefly. "Morning," she said without smiling. "Good morning," I answered softly. I reached for a mug from the cabinet but paused when I noticed all the shelves had been rearranged again. Nothing stayed in the same place for long anymore. Vanessa liked reorganizing things whenever she was upset. Last week she moved all my toiletries from the upstairs bathroom into a plastic basket under the basement sink, because she said the counter looked cluttered. I finally found a mug near the dishwasher. "Please use the gray ones," she said casually while still looking at her phone. "The white set is for guests." I looked down at the mug already in my hand. White porcelain. Tiny blue flowers around the rim. Something hot and embarrassed crawled slowly up my neck. "Of course," I murmured, setting it back carefully. Vanessa took her coffee upstairs without another word. A few minutes later Daniel wandered into the kitchen wearing wrinkled sweatpants and rubbing his eyes. "Morning, Mom." He kissed the top of my head distractedly while opening the refrigerator. It was the first affectionate thing he had done in weeks, and for one foolish second it made my chest ache with hope. "Did you sleep okay?" he asked. "I did," I lied. He nodded absent-mindedly while staring inside the refrigerator. "Vanessa has been stressed lately. The kids have a lot going on at school." There it was again. The quiet apology hidden inside ordinary conversation. I stirred cream into my coffee slowly. "Daniel," I asked carefully, "do you think Vanessa wants me here?" He shut the refrigerator door too quickly. "Mom, do not start." His tone hardened instantly. Not angry exactly. Defensive. Tired. Nobody said that. I looked down at the steam rising from my cup. I am trying very hard not to be in the way. Daniel sighed heavily and checked his phone. "You are overthinking things." Then he walked upstairs carrying a protein shake without touching his coffee. The silence afterward felt enormous. Through the back window, I could see the small fenced yard covered in frost. Vanessa had installed expensive outdoor furniture out there last week. Wicker chairs, a gas fire pit, decorative lanterns. I remembered Daniel telling me they were supposedly drowning in debt. I remembered signing away the house Richard and I built together because my son said his family was about to lose everything. Upstairs I heard laughter. Vanessa's voice. The children running down the hallway. Life moving forward without me. I stood alone in that beautiful kitchen holding the gray mug reserved for people who lived there permanently and realized I had never once been handed a key to the front door. 3 days later, I came back from the grocery store carrying 2 paper bags against my chest and realized I could not get into the house. The front door lock had been changed. First, I thought maybe I was mistaken. Maybe I had somehow used the wrong key all along. I stood there on the porch in the cold November wind trying the key again, while the plastic grocery bag handles dug painfully into my fingers. Nothing. The lock would not turn. Through the front window, I could see the television glowing softly inside the living room. Someone was home. I knocked gently at first, then harder. After nearly a minute, Vanessa finally opened the door halfway while holding her phone against her shoulder. "Oh," she said flatly. "The keypad company came earlier." I stared at her. The lock changed. "It is easier for the kids," she replied casually. Too many copies of keys floating around. Behind her, I noticed a small electronic keypad, mounted beside the door frame. Brand new. Shiny black numbers glowing softly. "What is the code?" I asked quietly. Vanessa adjusted the sleeve of her cream sweater before answering. "Daniel, and I thought it would be simpler if you just texted when you needed to come in." For a second, I honestly wondered if I had heard her correctly. The cold air moved through the open doorway, brushing against my face while she stood warm inside the house I helped pay for. "Text," I repeated. "Well," she said with a small shrug, "you are usually out during the day anyway." I looked past her toward the kitchen where my grandson sat eating crackers at the island counter. He glanced up at me briefly before returning to his cartoon. Children always notice more than adults think they do. I stepped inside slowly while Vanessa returned to her call without another word. The smell of roasted garlic filled the kitchen. Something simmered on the stove. Dinner preparations had already started, but nobody had asked whether I would be eating with them tonight. I carried the groceries downstairs carefully and unpacked them alone in the small mini refrigerator Daniel had placed beside the basement stairs 2 days earlier. "Just so you have your own space, Mom," he explained at the time. There had been kindness in his voice, but kindness can still become distance when used correctly. I sat on the edge of the pull-out bed afterward, staring at the little refrigerator humming softly beside the laundry machines. Yogurt, turkey slices, a carton of soup, a life reduced to shelves small enough to fit beside detergent bottles. Upstairs, I heard footsteps crossing the kitchen floor. Cabinet doors opening and closing. Ordinary family sounds happening one level above me, like I no longer belonged to them. That evening, Daniel came downstairs while I folded towels near the dryer. "Hey," he said awkwardly. "Vanessa mentioned the lock thing upset you." I kept folding slowly. I was only surprised. "It is not personal, Mom." That sentence lingered in the air for several seconds. Not personal. As if being locked out of the home your son promised would always be yours was simply practical household management. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck the way he always did when uncomfortable. "Vanessa likes structure. You know how she is." I placed another towel into the basket carefully. "I remember when you were 7 years old and got locked outside during a thunderstorm because you forgot your key," I said softly. "You cried so hard I slept beside your bed that entire night because you were afraid it would happen again." Daniel looked down immediately. Shame flickered across his face before disappearing just as quickly. "Mom," he sighed. "Please do not make everything emotional." Then he walked back upstairs before I could answer. I stood alone beside the dryer listening to his footsteps fade above me and realized something painful. Somewhere along the way, my son had learned to treat my love like an inconvenience. And the worst part was how naturally he did it now. That weekend, the entire family went out to dinner without telling me. I found out because my granddaughter Lily ran downstairs around 5 o'clock wearing a little red coat and sparkly shoes. "Grandma, are you not coming with us?" she asked innocently while twirling in circles beside the laundry basket. Before I could answer, Vanessa appeared at the top of the basement stairs. "Lily, come on," she called sharply. "We are going to be late." Lily frowned. "But Grandma is dressed." I looked down at myself automatically. Beige sweater, dark jeans, small pearl earrings Richard bought me on our 25th anniversary. I had dressed because earlier that afternoon I overheard Daniel mention reservations while he spoke on the phone. A family dinner downtown. I assumed they meant all of us. Vanessa finally walked downstairs with her purse hanging from one shoulder. Her perfume filled the small basement immediately. Clean. Expensive. Cold. "Oh," she said, glancing briefly at my clothes. I did not realize Daniel mentioned dinner. Her expression never changed, but I could feel the lie sitting between us. "It is really more of a business thing." I nodded slowly even though Daniel had specifically mentioned bringing the children. Lily still looked confused. "But Daddy said we were celebrating." Vanessa smiled tightly at her daughter. "Sweetheart, go wait in the car." The moment Lily disappeared upstairs, the silence changed. Vanessa adjusted the bracelet on her wrist while avoiding my eyes. "Evelyn." Sometimes Daniel feels overwhelmed trying to balance everything. I stood there quietly. "I have not asked him for anything." "That is not what I mean." Her voice stayed soft and controlled. "It is just difficult having another person in the house all the time." Another person. Not mother. Not family. Just another person. I folded one of Richard's old flannel shirts slowly before placing it into the donation box beside the dryer. I had started giving away some of my things that morning. Not because I wanted to leave yet, but because I was beginning to understand I already had. "I will stay out of the way tonight," I said calmly. Vanessa exhaled with visible relief. "Thank you. You are making this easier." Easier. That word stayed with me long after the front door closed behind them. The house became painfully quiet afterward. No cartoons upstairs. No running footsteps. No cabinet doors slamming. Just the low ticking of the kitchen clock echoing faintly through the vents. Around 7:30, I wandered upstairs and stood in the dark kitchen staring at the framed family photos lining the hallway wall. Vacation pictures. School portraits. Christmas mornings. In every recent photograph, Vanessa stood near the center smiling confidently while Daniel hovered somewhere beside her. The children looked happy. Normal. I searched the wall for a single picture of Richard and me. There was not one. Not even from our 50th anniversary party 3 years before he died. It was as though our lives had quietly disappeared from the family history the moment we stopped being useful. I opened the refrigerator and saw containers labeled carefully in Vanessa's handwriting. Taco meat. Salad dressing. Organic snacks for the children. Near the bottom shelf sat the leftover pot roast I made 2 nights earlier. Untouched. I closed the refrigerator gently and made myself a peanut butter sandwich instead. While eating alone at the counter, I noticed an envelope partially tucked beneath a stack of mail near Daniel's laptop. My name was written across the front in black ink. Just Evelyn. No mom. No warmth. Curious, I picked it up slowly. Inside was a brochure from a senior living community 20 miles away. Bright smiling elderly couples stood in front of a fountain beneath the words independent living made simple. My hands went completely still. At the bottom of the page, someone had circled a phone number in blue pen. I stared at it for a very long time before quietly placing everything back exactly where I found it. Then I washed my plate, turned off the kitchen light, and returned downstairs without making a sound. The next afternoon, rain fell steadily against the basement window while I sorted through the last box from my old house. The cardboard smelled faintly of dust and cedar. Inside were pieces of a life nobody upstairs seemed to remember anymore. Richard's old gardening gloves. Christmas ornaments wrapped carefully in newspaper. A faded drawing Daniel made in 2nd grade that said "My mom is my hero" in crooked blue letters. I sat cross-legged on the floor holding that paper longer than I should have. Children mean those things when they say them. At least they do at the time. Around 3 o'clock, I heard the front door open upstairs, followed by hurried footsteps and laughter. Vanessa's voice carried through the vents. "Leave the shopping bags by the island," she called brightly. Curious, I climbed the stairs quietly and stopped halfway when I saw several large department store bags scattered across the kitchen floor. Designer logos printed across thick white paper. Expensive stores. The kind Richard and I only visited on anniversaries. Vanessa stood near the counter unwrapping a brand new leather handbag, while Daniel scrolled through something on his phone. "The kitchen chair should arrive Friday," Vanessa said excitedly. "And the contractor confirmed the marble backsplash this morning." I froze on the staircase. Contractor. Marble backsplash. New furniture. Daniel noticed me first. His smile disappeared immediately. "Mom," he said too quickly. "We were just talking about some upgrades." Vanessa did not look embarrassed at all. In fact, she seemed energized. "You know how outdated the kitchen was," she said casually while peeling protective wrapping off the handbag strap. I looked around slowly at the enormous stainless steel refrigerator, the oversized island, the polished hardwood floors. Outdated was not the word I would have used. "I thought money was tight," I said carefully. The room went still for half a second. Then Vanessa laughed softly like I had misunderstood something obvious. "Things are improving now." Daniel finally stood up from his chair. "Mom, the business situation stabilized faster than expected." Stabilized. I repeated that word silently inside my head while staring at the shopping bags covering the floor. 2 months ago, my son sat crying at my kitchen table telling me his family might lose everything. I remembered the way his hand shook while holding his coffee cup. I remembered lying awake for nights afterward terrified my grandchildren would end up without a home. And now there were luxury handbags sitting where my groceries used to go. "That is wonderful news," I said quietly. Vanessa smiled again, relieved by my calm reaction. "It really is. We finally feel like we can breathe again." Breathe again. Something cold settled deep inside my chest then. Not anger exactly. Clarity. Slow and painful clarity. My eyes drifted toward the patio doors where brand new outdoor furniture sat beneath string lights Vanessa recently installed. Last week a delivery truck brought a 70-inch television for the upstairs family room. Daniel called it a necessary replacement because the old one had outdated picture quality. I suddenly remembered every sacrifice Richard and I postponed over the years. Vacations skipped. Cars driven 15 years too long. Kitchen cabinets we never replaced because college tuition came first. We spent our lives believing careful love built stable families. Standing there in that gleaming kitchen, I realized I had funded comfort, not survival. Vanessa picked up another shopping bag cheerfully. I found the cutest winter coats for the kids too. They were having an incredible sale. Daniel would not look directly at me anymore. His shoulders stayed tense as if he already understood what I was beginning to see. The business had never been dying. Maybe struggling. Maybe inconvenient. But not drowning. Not enough to justify destroying my entire future. I nodded slowly and returned downstairs carrying Richard's old drawing in my hands. Once back in the basement, I sat on the edge of the pull-out bed staring at the crooked blue letters across the page. My mom is my hero. Upstairs I heard laughter again. Cabinet doors opening. Shopping bags rustling. A happy family enjoying the rewards of my sacrifice while I sat beside a mini refrigerator in a room without windows large enough to let in proper sunlight. For the first time since moving in, I stopped asking myself whether I belonged there. Instead, I began wondering how long they had planned for me not to. 2 mornings later, I was carrying a basket of folded laundry upstairs when the doorbell rang. Vanessa was in the shower and Daniel had already left for work, so I set the basket down beside the stairs and answered it myself. A man in a dark coat stood on the porch holding a clipboard. "Delivery for Mrs. Harper," he said politely. "Kitchen and patio invoice confirmation." I hesitated for a second before taking the envelope from him. The total amount printed across the front nearly made me lose my balance. $27,000. I stared at the number while cold air drifted through the open doorway. $27,000 for outdoor furniture, appliances, custom lighting, and remodeling work. My hands tightened slightly around the envelope. That amount was almost exactly what Daniel told me he needed to prevent foreclosure on the business loan. The same amount I transferred from the sale of my house without hesitation. Upstairs, the shower turned off. I closed the front door quietly and placed the envelope exactly where the delivery man left it. Then I returned downstairs carrying the laundry basket as carefully as if nothing had changed. But something had. A quiet shift inside me. The kind that happens when confusion finally hardens into truth. That afternoon, Vanessa hosted 2 of her friends for lunch while I stayed downstairs pretending to organize storage. Boxes. Their voices drifted clearly through the vents above me along with bursts of laughter and clinking wine glasses. "The remodel looks incredible," one woman said. "Daniel really stepped up." Vanessa laughed softly. "Trust me, it took years of convincing him to stop feeling guilty about his mother." The room upstairs erupted in knowing laughter. I sat perfectly still beside the half-open storage bin in my lap. "She practically handed over the money," Vanessa continued. "Honestly, if someone volunteers to sacrifice themselves, eventually you stop arguing." Another woman laughed harder this time. "So what happens now?" There was a pause. I could almost picture Vanessa sipping her wine calmly before answering. "We are looking into communities for seniors. Somewhere comfortable. She needs people her own age around her." Comfortable. The same word people use when describing waiting rooms and hotel lobbies. Places nobody truly belongs. I lowered my eyes toward the old photo album resting beside me on the floor. Richard smiling beside our first station wagon. Daniel at age 12 holding a baseball glove nearly bigger than his chest. A family built slowly over decades. Reduced upstairs to an inconvenience with good credit and retirement savings. "Daniel feels bad sometimes," Vanessa admitted. "But he knows this is healthier long term. Boundaries matter." I closed the photo album gently. Boundaries. Another carefully chosen word designed to make cruelty sound responsible. A few minutes later, footsteps crossed the kitchen overhead. Chairs scraped against hardwood floors. The women gathered their coats while complimenting the renovations again. "You deserve this house," someone told Vanessa warmly before the front door closed behind them. Silence returned slowly afterward. I remained downstairs long after the guests left, staring at the unfinished concrete wall across from the pull-out bed. Something surprising happened then. I did not cry. I thought I would. I thought hearing strangers discuss my removal from the family like a scheduling inconvenience would shatter whatever dignity I still had left. But instead I felt strangely calm, like someone waking from anesthesia and finally seeing clearly again. Around 6 o'clock, Daniel came downstairs carrying a plate of pasta. "Vanessa made extra," he said quietly, placing it beside me. Steam curled upward beneath the basement light. I looked at him for a long moment. His tired eyes. The wedding ring on his finger. The same nervous habit of shifting his weight from one foot to the other that he had as a little boy whenever he lied about breaking something. "Did you know about the senior living brochure?" I asked softly. Daniel froze instantly. Just for a second. But it was enough. "Mom," he sighed heavily. "We were only exploring options." Options. Such a small harmless word. I nodded slowly and looked down at the untouched plate in my lap. Then, for the first time since moving into that house, I realized something important. They were not waiting for me to leave someday. They were already planning the exact moment I would. After that conversation, something inside me quietly shut down. I stopped trying to make the house feel warm. I stopped setting the breakfast table before everyone woke up. I stopped folding the children's laundry without being asked. Every morning, I still smiled at Lily and Jacob before school, but I no longer chased after the feeling that I belonged there. It was strange how quickly people noticed the absence of things they never appreciated properly. 3 days later, Vanessa came downstairs holding an empty laundry basket against her hip. "Evelyn," she called casually, "did you already wash the kids' uniforms?" I looked up from the paperback novel in my lap. "No," I answered calmly. She blinked once as if she genuinely did not understand the response. "Oh." The silence stretched awkwardly. "Well, they need them tomorrow." I nodded politely. "Then you should probably start a load soon." For the first time since I moved in, Vanessa looked visibly irritated in front of me instead of carefully composed. She shifted the basket slightly and forced a smile that did not reach her eyes. "You usually handle it during the day." "I know," I said softly before returning to my book. She stood there another second waiting for guilt to appear on my face. When it did not, she finally turned and walked back upstairs without another word. That evening, nobody invited me to dinner. I heard dishes clattering in the kitchen overhead and smelled baked chicken drifting through the vents while I sat downstairs eating canned soup beside the small folding table Daniel bought for me after I moved in. Strangely, I did not feel lonely anymore. Just awake. Later that night, I opened my laptop and quietly began searching apartment listings 20 miles away near the coast. Small places. 1-bedroom units with balconies. Senior communities where people actually chose to live rather than being gently pushed there. I looked at photographs of tiny kitchens flooded with sunlight and imagined drinking coffee somewhere nobody treated me like temporary furniture. Around midnight, I found a modest apartment in a quiet beach town north of the city. White walls. Blue shutters. Rent higher than I preferred, but manageable with what remained of my retirement savings. I stared at the pictures for a long time before sending an inquiry email. The next morning, Daniel cornered me near the coffee maker, while Vanessa drove the children to school. "Mom," he said carefully, "Vanessa feels tension lately." I poured cream slowly into my coffee. "I imagine she does." He sighed heavily. "You know how much pressure we are under." I almost laughed at the sentence. Pressure. The remodeled kitchen. The new patio furniture. The luxury shopping bags. "Daniel," I asked quietly, "did you ever intend for me to stay here permanently?" He looked away immediately. That was answer enough. "We thought maybe eventually you would be happier somewhere with more support," he said carefully. "People your age need community. People your age." I stirred my coffee gently while studying the dark liquid spinning inside the mug. It amazed me how quickly children begin speaking to parents like strangers once money changes hands. "Your father worked double shifts for 12 years so you could attend college debt-free," I said softly. Daniel rubbed his forehead. "Mom, please do not do this." "Do what?" "Make everything sound like we owe you forever." I looked at him then. Really looked. At him. The tired eyes. The expensive watch on his wrist I had never seen before moving in. The discomfort that appeared every time guilt wandered too close to the surface. "No," I answered quietly. "I think I finally understand that you do not believe you owe me anything at all." Upstairs, the dryer buzzed loudly. Somewhere outside, a lawnmower hummed in the distance. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary morning. But Daniel suddenly looked smaller standing there in that polished kitchen than he ever had as a frightened little boy. He opened his mouth like he wanted to defend himself, but no words came out. Because some truths become impossible to soften once spoken aloud. The apartment manager called me the following Tuesday. While I was sitting alone in the basement folding towels, nobody thanked me for any more. "Mrs. Harper," the woman said warmly, "the coastal unit is available if you are still interested." I glanced around the basement while she spoke. The exposed pipes overhead. The single narrow window near the ceiling letting in weak gray light. The mini refrigerator humming beside the washing machine. For the first time since selling my home, I felt something close to peace settle quietly inside me. "Yes," I answered softly. "I am still interested." We arranged everything that afternoon. Move-in date. Deposit. Paperwork. The woman explained the apartment faced west and overlooked a small marina where sailboats docked during the winter months. I could almost smell the ocean listening to her voice. After we hung up, I opened my banking app carefully and stared at the remaining balance in my retirement account. Smaller than it should have been. Smaller than Richard and I spent decades planning for. But enough. Enough for one quiet woman who no longer needed to rescue anybody. Upstairs, I heard Vanessa laughing loudly on a phone call while cabinet doors slammed open and shut. I closed the banking app and began sorting my belongings into neat piles across the pull-out bed. Important papers first. Richard's photographs. Jewelry. The small ceramic angel Lily made for me in kindergarten before Vanessa decided glitter crafts were too messy to keep around the house. By evening, 3 cardboard boxes sat packed beside the stairs. Nobody noticed. Or maybe they did and assumed I was finally preparing for the senior living community brochure waiting upstairs. The next morning, I took a taxi to the bank without mentioning it to anyone. Rain covered the streets in silver reflections while the driver hummed softly along to old country music on the radio. Inside the bank, I requested copies of every transaction connected to the money from my house sale. The young banker printed everything politely without asking questions. Sitting there beneath fluorescent lights, I watched page after page slide from the printer. Transfers. Remodel payments. Luxury purchases. Contractor invoices. Thousands disappearing into things nobody truly needed. I felt strangely detached looking at the numbers. As if I were reading about another woman's life entirely. On the drive back, my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "Can you pick up Lily from dance practice at 4? No greeting. No please. Just expectation. I stared at the message for several seconds before typing a response I never would have written a month earlier. "I am unavailable today." Her reply came almost immediately. "Seriously?" I slipped the phone back into my purse without answering. That evening, tension spread through the house like smoke. Cabinet doors closed harder than usual upstairs. Vanessa barely looked at me during dinner. Daniel kept rubbing his forehead while pretending to focus on his laptop. Finally, after the children went upstairs, Vanessa spoke without lifting her eyes from her wine glass. "You have been distant lately." I folded my napkin carefully beside my plate. "Have I?" "The children notice these things," she continued. "This environment affects everyone." Environment. Another polished word wrapped around blame. Daniel cleared his throat awkwardly. "Maybe we should all communicate better." I looked at him calmly. "You mean I should?" Nobody answered. The silence told me everything. Later that night, after the house finally went quiet, I carried one of my packed boxes upstairs toward the front door. Halfway there, I noticed Daniel standing alone in the dark kitchen, staring out the window. He turned when he heard me. His eyes landed on the box in my arms. "What is that?" he asked quietly. "My things," I answered. Confusion flickered across his face first. Then something else. Fear. Not sadness. Not regret. Fear. "Mom," he said slowly. "What exactly are you planning?" I adjusted my grip on the box and looked at my son standing inside the beautiful kitchen my sacrifice helped build. For the first time in months, his voice sounded uncertain. Vulnerable. Like he suddenly realized the person they treated as disposable still had the ability to leave on her own terms. "I think," I said softly, "I am finally going home." I left on a Thursday morning before anyone else woke up. The house was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator, and the ticking kitchen clock Vanessa once said sounded too old-fashioned for the remodel she wanted. Rain clouds hung low outside the windows, turning everything pale gray. I stood in the kitchen for a moment holding my coat and looking around at the polished counters, the expensive light fixtures, the marble backsplash my house had paid for. Strange how beautiful things can still feel empty. My 3 boxes waited beside the front door. One held clothes. One held paperwork and photographs. The third carried the pieces of my life nobody upstairs had room for anymore. I moved quietly because I did not want Lily or Jacob waking up confused. Children should not carry the weight of adult failures. As I reached for the door handle, a voice behind me stopped me. "Mom!" Daniel stood near the staircase wearing sweatpants and exhaustion across his face. For a second, neither of us spoke. He looked at the boxes, then at me. "You are really leaving?" It was not a question. I nodded once. "I found a place near the coast." He rubbed both hands over his face slowly. "You should have talked to me first." I almost smiled at that. After months of being discussed like a problem behind closed doors, suddenly he wanted conversation. "There is nothing left to discuss, Daniel." He stepped closer, lowering his voice instinctively as if afraid Vanessa might hear. "Mom, things have just been stressful lately." "No, I answered calmly. Stress does not make people erase someone from their family. It reveals who they already are." He looked wounded hearing that, but not surprised. That was the hardest part. Deep down, he already knew it was true. Upstairs, I heard a floorboard creak softly. Vanessa was awake now, too. Daniel glanced nervously toward the hallway before speaking again. "You are overreacting." I studied my son quietly. The same boy who once cried after accidentally stepping on a bird in our driveway, because he could not bear hurting something smaller than himself. Somewhere between childhood and adulthood, compassion had slowly become convenience. "I sold the only home I had left because you said your family was drowning," I said softly. "Then I watched you spend that money turning this house into a showroom while your wife searched for places to send me away." Daniel's face tightened immediately. "That is not fair." "It is exactly fair." Silence settled heavily between us. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows. Finally, he looked down at the floor and whispered something so quietly I almost missed it. "I did not think it would become this." Neither did I. A car horn sounded softly outside. The taxi had arrived. I picked up one of the boxes near the door. Daniel instinctively reached for it too, but I shook my head gently. "I can carry my own things." He let go immediately. That small moment hurt him more than shouting ever could. Vanessa finally appeared near the staircase wrapped in a cream robe, watching silently with crossed arms. Even now, she looked irritated more than remorseful. "Well," she said flatly, "I hope this new place makes you happy." I looked at her calmly. For months I imagined saying something sharp before leaving. Something unforgettable. But standing there with my coat on and freedom waiting outside, I realized bitterness would only keep me tied to them longer. "I think peace and happiness are different things," I said quietly. "But peace is enough for me." Then I opened the front door and walked away. The coastal apartment smelled like salt air and fresh paint. Tiny compared to my old house. Tiny compared to Daniel's polished, suburban kitchen. But the first evening there, I sat alone on the small balcony wrapped in a blanket while sailboats rocked gently across the marina below. Nobody criticized the way I folded towels. Nobody sighed when I entered a room. Nobody treated me like temporary furniture taking up valuable space. Around sunset, my phone rang. "Daniel." I watched his name glow across the screen while gulls cried somewhere beyond the water. For a long moment I considered ignoring it. Then I answered quietly. He did not speak right away. When he finally did, his voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it before. "Mom," he whispered. "I made a mistake." I closed my eyes briefly and listened to the ocean wind moving across the balcony. Somewhere behind me, inside my little apartment, the kettle began to whistle softly. Home. Real home. Not because it was large or expensive or shared with family, but because for the first time in a very long while, I did not have to earn my right to exist there. "So did I answered gently before ending the call.